Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the first of two. Remember, I'm splitting them into two as at least one of them gets restricted every single day. I am in a different place. My home is without electricity. The electrician has finally destroyed my electricity to replace the board. So I'm at my folks' place. I don't know what my video output will be today. It is rather contingent on lots of variables, but it'll be what it is because that's a really meaningful thing to say. It is what it is. Anyway, let's go to where we normally start. Your general staff figures for Ukrainian, the Ukrainian general staff figures for Russian losses for the day before. Fairly average numbers for liquidated personnel, tanks, and armored personnel vehicles. It is difficult to say that. Obviously, this refers to people, human beings, so we must remember that. 530 liquidated personnel is not huge, but not the lowest it's been. So there or thereabouts. 6 tanks, 6 APVs. I've seen a lot of footage of destroyed vehicles over the last 24 hours. There's just a lot coming out. Krasnohorivka, there's a lot lost from there. So I don't know whether we'll see tomorrow as having an uptick in those categories. It'll be interesting to see. 19 artillery systems, 3 MLRS. That is another bad day for the Russians in terms of artillery systems. Surely their capabilities will be affected in how capable they are in defending those lines and hammering the Ukrainian offensives with lead from the sky. Uh, at some point, you might imagine they will be degraded to the point where you might see a larger counteroffensive, but it just does depend how many pieces they have in stocks back in Russia, how cannibalized those already are, whether they are it is easy to get those to the front line. 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems. I saw one Strela, footage of a Strela, which is a short-range anti-aircraft system taken out yesterday. So that is above average. 3. As you can see, 433 for a 510-day war or thereabouts. That is on average of less than 1 a day. So 3 is a good day for the Ukrainians. 33 drones and 14 cruise missiles. That's not from last night, but the night before. There was a significant barrage last night again, and we'll come on to talk about that. 29 vehicles and fuel tanks. You can see that the Ukrainians must really be hammering those Russian logistics. We hear rumors of ammunition rationing and shell hunger for the Russians. But then you hear other things like they're still firing 5 times as many shells as the Ukrainians. Although on the southern front, there are claims that the Ukrainians are firing 2.5 times what the Russians are. It's a fog of war. Who knows what the actual truth is? But I can't imagine that the Russians aren't going to be somewhat concerned about their supply of ammunition. 2 pieces of special equipment. So that could be. I showed yesterday some electronic warfare, some jamming equipment getting taken out. Zhitel ZH330, if I remember correctly. So let's see what we can work out in terms of finding out if these figures are at all accurate. Well, we had Prigozhin, the Wagner leader, yesterday, so he had a rare appearance. It said the head of the Russian army concealed the real casualties. Wagner forces in Bakhmut region alone gave 22,000 dead and 40,000 wounded. So that's 62,000 casualties in Bakhmut alone for Wagner alone. Right? That's not DPR. That's not LPR. That's not other PMCs, private military companies. That's not conventional Russian forces. That is just Wagner, and it's only in Bakhmut. So other Wagner losses elsewhere will mean that the total of Wagner loss will be higher. So that's not even. So he continues, not even counting the other regions. In this case, the Russian army has more than 100,000 casualties. Wagner is not included. I don't know whether he means, referring to the total, including all those subcategories, whether those casualties are deaths or deaths and wounded, whether that's just Bakhmut alone or whether that refers to the whole front line. So there's lots of questions in that, but really fascinating insight. And for those Russians who defend their sort of casualty rates as being lower than Ukrainians, this might be a bit of a corrective for them. And then when we try and get some more idea as to the accuracy of the general staff claims, here we have visually confirmed losses from Oryx for Russian equipment. and we have 67 in total. Things that jump out are IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles. Well, you've got an unknown one, so let's add that in: 19, 24, 26, 28, 29, 30 or so, or 20, about 30 infantry fighting vehicles, 18 BMP-1s. Wow, just a phenomenal statistic there. And then, yeah, there's a Strela there. We've got some we've got some artillery in there. Not a huge amount considering the numbers that are posted on a daily basis. But 67 in total is significant. Now let's see what the Ukrainians have. 67 versus 17 for the same time period. And that, again, this is all about telling a story as well. It's not just about, oh, are the general staff correct? It's like, what can we learn from this? So here we have just one tank. And that tells me that the Ukrainians are not committing huge amounts of equipment to offensives. They are sitting back and letting their artillery, they're letting their HIMARS, they're letting their Storm Shadows do the work. And so people might, yesterday I was thinking, I was having a bit of a moment of like, what do I feel about the offensive? What's going on? What are the strategies? And I just think that they're not at the moment massively concerned about taking territory. They are just in this stage, and it might take far longer than might have been envisaged. It will take as long as it needs to take, but I think Ukraine are in this stage of just attriting air defense systems, attriting artillery, and attriting ISR equipment and whatnot. So I think, I think this is a sign that that is their current strategy, these figures. Anyway, moving on. My mouse is not working very well. So we have Russian headquarters in Soledar being hit. This is potentially a JDAM, as reported here. So this was a pretty significant hit by the looks of it. Bang. So that, if that was a headquarters, then of course, what does that mean? Does that mean is it command and control? Are they degrading the Russian command and control capabilities in Bakhmut? Are there important leaders that were taken out in that? Or is it just an empty house that they're saying? Are they going to waste a JDAM on that? No. So you think that was they at least thought that was headquarters. Who was inside? I guess only they will know, they and the Russians, and maybe even then it's a hope. But these kind of hits, we are seeing more JDAMs hit, these C2 nodes, these command and control nodes. And I think, again, you put that together with the hitting of artillery systems and anti-aircraft warfare systems and logistics vehicles and special equipment, and you're just getting this strategy of thoroughly degrading the Russian forces behind the lines so that they are essentially unable to defend competently. Here we have video of a T90 tank, just throwing that one in. It's a first-person view drone piece of footage. So again, that's significant because T90s are your more modern, the better Russian tanks supposedly, although there'll be arguments about different variations of other T tanks. But T90 getting taken out by a first-person view racing drone is not ideal for the Russians. It should be, their better tanks should be able to withstand that kind of munition, where you see it sort of drive off smoking and in quite a lot of trouble. Here we have Krasnohorivka. So I was telling you about Krasnohorivka. That's the assault on the mine. There are some claims that the Russians have been shelled out of that mine area now. I imagine that would be the case. We already saw that it was being shelled yesterday. I just would assume the Ukrainians would be throwing JDAMs and artillery and all sorts at it, and making it untenable for the Russians to stay there. There is a lot, as you can see, there are a lot of vehicles that are taken out, that were destroyed in that attack. This was the mine plowed path that I was telling you about, that the Russians created. So they had a single path down there that split into two, and I think the mine clearing vehicle was disabled at the end of that, right at the mine, and then so lots of homonyms here, like mine and mine. So the actual mine shaft, but the clearing mines uh, with the mine clearer until they get to the mine shaft, so on and so forth. You get the point. And yeah, just along that single track. Then the problem with this, and we've seen this with the Ukrainians, is that you clear a narrow path, then that is the only path that vehicles can go down, which means, well, we know where they're going to drive. It's predictable. We can hit that more easily with artillery. It's not like they're going to be weaving. It's not like they're going to be spread out horizontally, if you like. They're going to be going vertically. We know that all the vehicles are going to travel along that line. And if we miss the first one, we'll be getting the second one if we can get at least the direction correct on our artillery, depending on where it is. Again, you get the point. It's going to be easy, and that's a really difficult thing to do, to attack down at that single narrow path, and that's what the Ukrainians have been finding at the beginning of their counteroffensive. Now, there's a big fire in Mariupol. It's thought to be arson. This is the metallurgists, the Palace of Culture. I don't know much about this place. So I don't know if this is something to do with attacking a kind of Russian occupied culture, so to speak. Whether this is a big statement or whether it's just a building that's been targeted. It could be that it holds some kind of cultural significance for partisans to strike, to take out. Okay, now let's go to the strikes that have happened overnight. But before we do that, just to remind you what happened yesterday. And yesterday, the Ukrainians shot down 37 and 63 drones and missiles launched. So that was a lot of drones and missiles that got through the night before. And that caused loads of damage, loads of footage coming out of the damage from the previous night. That took out grain storage. It basically took out the port of Odessa and the ports around it from being able to function. The Russians destroyed 60,000 tons of grain in the port of Chornomorsk. That is really, well, horrific, because that food is destined for, well, we'll find out soon, actually, not just like Africa and India, but actually, interestingly, China. And there could be some ramifications for that. Well, last night, that avenging of the Kerch Bridge continued, and the Russians fired 19 cruise missiles and 19 loitering munitions, K drones, at Ukraine, and a lot of them got through. So the air defense forces destroyed 18 aerial targets. That's of 38. So 20 got through. They 2 sea-based cruise missiles, 3 ground-launched cruise missiles, and 13 strike drones. Well, most of the cruise missiles got through then, and they will cause significant damage. That is 7 Onyx, 4 X or KH-22 missiles were launched from the Black Sea and Crimea. 13 out of 19 Shahed drones were shot down. 2 out of 3 Caliber, 3 out of 5 Iskanders. So that's a lot of munition to hit those ports. Reports of P-800 Onyx anti-ship missiles. Again, we saw them the night before. None of them were shot down the night before. Russians appear to be sending everything they've got against Odessa right now, said Ocean Defender last night. Now, Onyx is a land. Well, let's look at both of these. You've got KH-22 and Onyx missiles. Why did the air defense not shoot them down? They attacked the port of Odessa and Environs. Well, the KH-22 or X-22 supersonic missile, that means it goes faster than the speed of sound. It's supersonic up to Mach 5. It's not hypersonic, but it's super quick. Its speed is more than 4,000 kilometers per hour. They enter the target along a ballistic trajectory. So they are going very high, and it makes it really difficult for them to be shot down. Their ballistic trajectory is one that really only your very best systems like Patriot, perhaps SAMP-T, will take out. Patriot complexes are needed to shoot it down. Onyx is a land-based anti-ship missile. It flies at a high altitude, has a speed of more than 3,000 kilometers an hour, and then during the approach, they descend to 10 to 15 meters on the target. So this is because they are anti-ship missiles. You can imagine they'll be flying just above the water, very low above the surface of the water, so it's difficult to detect, let alone shoot them down. So both of these missiles are really difficult for the Ukrainians to destroy. To protect Odessa and Mykolaiv, we need more Patriot or SAMP-T complexes that we could deploy in these cities. Well, there's potential news of some more systems being sent. We'll come to that a little bit later, but of course, solving these things is like some of the solutions being given to the minefields. It's like, yeah, okay, well, you could develop unmanned ground vehicles and do this and do that, but the timescale to solving the minefield problem is like 6 months, and the timescale for getting some of these things out there and protecting these cities will, yeah, it's great that they are perhaps being provided, but unfortunately, right now those cities are being um, really badly hit, and as ports, that renders them unable to be ports, and that's hugely damaging not only for Ukraine but for the world supply of grain. Yeah, in Odessa, Onyx and KH-22 missiles hit the port and critical infrastructure, the grain and oil terminals, damaged tanks. And the problem is as well is that you hit grain. It's actually got explosive powder around grain. It's not like it is dangerous stuff. It sounds odd, but grain can be dangerous. That's why they filter air around it to get rid of that powder. Same, of course, with oil, where you've got lots of sunflower oil. It's incredibly flammable and very difficult to put out. So, damaged tanks and loading equipment. A fire broke out. No one was injured. There's wide scale destruction, though. More footage is coming out. Zelensky published a video of the consequences of the Russian terrorist attacks on Odessa and Mykolaiv. Unfortunately, there are wounded, there are dead. My condolences to the family and friends, but the evil state does not have missiles that are stronger than our will to preserve life, support each other, and win. So Zelensky's obviously staying strong there, but this is going to be a really big hit to the Ukrainians, and it's really vengeful full stuff because this is attacking essentially the Ukrainian ability to export their grain, which, as I've said before, then affects people around the world. This isn't just an attack on Ukraine; it's an attack on all the recipients of that grain, and they've stopped the grain deal as well. Impact rate of a Shahed drone in Semenivka in the Chernihiv Oblast in the northeast of Ukraine. So it's not just Odessa and Mykolaiv down in the south, not too far from Dnipro River, but it's actually other places being targeted too. Explosions are ringing out in occupied Crimea this morning. Occupiers say the blasts in the northwest of the peninsula were caused by drones. So perhaps a little bit of retaliation there by Ukraine. The What's interesting is the military base with that large ammunition dump that was destroyed near Feodosia in the southeast of Crimea yesterday, where that was cooking off for an awful long time. That was supposedly, I don't know if I heard it was the biggest ammunition dump in Ukraine. No, it might have been the biggest ammunition dump in Crimea. I think they'd moved that back and back behind. So I think it was even out of range of storm shadows, really the far southeast of Crimea, and depends where you're releasing the Storm Shadow missiles. And so that being done by partisans, that's why that was important. It was because it's a really significant target. It couldn't be hit by Storm Shadows, and the partisans stood up and did the business. Right, moving on to a couple of little bits and pieces. The Russian Ministry of Defense, I mean, there's going to be a lot to say in different segments here about the grain deal and about grain export. Russian Defense Ministry announced that from midnight Moscow time on July the 20th, ships sailing through the Black Sea to the ports of Ukraine will be regarded as potential carriers of military cargo. This is massive. The flag countries of such vessels will be considered involved in the conflict on the side of Ukraine. They're basically saying any commercial vessels in the Black Sea are open game for being a hit. I mean, this is terrible. This is massively controversial. Not just controversial, it's criminal. It's just horrific that they're holding basically the world to ransom in terms of operating commercial enterprises to feed people. Yeah, right. They already part of the grain deal. Russia were already checking commercial vessels going into the Black Sea, so that to make sure they didn't have military cargo on anyway. So it's kind of they were already doing that. This is even worse. Russian Defense Ministry, a number of sea areas in the northwestern and southeastern parts of the international waters of the Black Sea have been declared temporarily dangerous for navigation. There's a really good video by let's have a little look. I think I'll bring it up now, actually. It's well worth a watch. This is what is going on with shipping. That's a channel. It's a big shipping channel. Black Sea grain ends. Ukraine proposes a temporary maritime route. Talks a lot about this, the implications, and also, what Russia are doing, what Ukraine would like. Ukraine are offering to basically underwrite ships that do deliver grain. So even if the ships don't get insurance elsewhere, then if they get blown up, then Ukraine will kind of pay for that type thing. That's how important it is that they get this grain out. But there's all these kind of back and forth. There's all this back and forth going on between Ukraine and Russia and various nations. But that's a really worthwhile video, worth watching that. And then the US has said that Russia has placed additional sea mines on the way to Ukraine's ports. So then when you go to, look at the Black Sea and on the way, these shipping lanes on the way to Odessa and these other ports in the area, Chornomorska, is it? Then, yeah, the claim is that the Russians have mined that. Well, again, that's surely a war crime because Ukraine don't have a navy, right? So who are those? Those mines? What's the intention of those mines? Of laying those mines? Who are they aimed at hitting? This is not the Ukrainian navy because they have no navy. So therefore, those mines are laid specifically to destroy commercial um, cargo ships. Absolutely terrible. Anyway, we'll talk more about the grain deal in the geopolitical section in part 2 of this. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. And I will speak to you in part 2 of the news video soon.